Hello everyone, my name is Ty Hurd, and in this video we'll be discussing the needs and challenges that disaster workers experience throughout their emotional phases that follow a major disaster. After watching the video that we were assigned, I reflected on how these phases affect both responders and survivors, and how counselors can support them through each stage. In this video, again, I will walk you through the heroic phase, the honeymoon phase, and if it's possible, I want to talk about the crash points and the disillusionment phase, including the type of clinical conditions that we may develop and the most effective treatment approaches that we have. Okay, so first let's talk about the needs and challenges of the heroic phase. The heroic phase happens immediately after a disaster, in the stage where usually a surge of urgency or a strong instinct to help. Disaster work often pushes people and themselves far beyond their usual physical and emotional limits because their focus is solely on saving lives and stability of the situations. Some key needs and challenges in this phase includes physical exhaustion. Many operate on very little sleep, food, or rest because the demand is so high. Another thing will be high emotional intensity. They often surrounded by chaos, injury, and loss, which requires quick decision making in a high stressful environment. We also have limited resources where responders may struggle with shortage of equipment, medical supplies, or personnel. And the last thing that I want to focus on is the pressure and responsibilities. They feel a very powerful sense of duty, which sometimes leads others to ignore their own needs. During this time, when we look at disaster work, their need to survival leadership enforces safety procedures, hydration, rest cycles, and clear communication. If these needs aren't met, the physical and mental wear can impact them later down the line through the recovery phase. Now we have the honeymoon phase and the potential crash point. After initial chaos settles, often what happens is we call this the honeymoon phase. This provides a period where the survivor and the responder becomes and feels comfortable, hopeful, and motivated. There is a sense of we survived this together, we can do this together. Media attention, donations, and communities gathered together are very common. However, the video highlighted that this phase can also include a crash point. Who experiences these crash points? I would say the disaster workers, survivors, and community leaders. Also, supporting volunteers. They have crash points too. When this does happen, usually weeks to a few months after the disaster, once the initial sense of hope fades and people realize how long the recovery actually is, then that's when they get to this, they go through the honeymoon phase, and then all of a sudden it slowly deteriorates, and then they go through this crash point. Why does the crash point occur? Sometimes the slowdown support, where the support drops, the volunteers may leave, or the resources are decreased. Another thing would be emotional burnout. Disaster workers particularly feel like they are having emotional weight, and all this need of they're needed at the moment, it becomes too much for them, and they burn out. And then also we have the increased fatigue, where it wears off and the exhaustion catches up, where they don't even realize how tired they really are. So for responders, the crash point can bring intense frustration, guilt, or not doing enough emotionally, detaching, and also feeling, like I said, very fatigued in their situation. So the last thing that I do want to discuss will be the number 3 phase, which will be the illusionment phase. This is the emotional impact in the clinical condition. The disillusionment phase often is the most difficult phase for people. During this time, the survivors in the disasters may feel fear, anger, hopelessness, disappointment, and a sense of being abandoned or forgotten. These emotions can escalate into mental health if they're not addressed early. If they don't connect with someone, or they feel like they can do it all on their own, it can decrease and go down a really, really, I would say, dark path. So when we look at the clinical conditions that may develop, based on the challenges described in the video and the research on the disaster psychology, common condition includes, they can include acute stress disorders. We also have the post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, which is very common. Major depressive disorder. We also have the generalized anxiety disorder. We have the complicated grief. We have the burnout and the compensation fatigue. And then we also have the adjustment disorder. So disaster workers are increasingly vulnerable because their repetitive exposure to trauma, death sometimes, and long hours, and emotional investment in other people, serving others instead of serving themselves. I said the last thing, but really the last thing would be number 4. What I want to focus on too would be the best treatment approaches. So for disaster workers and the desire or the survivor during the disillusionment phase, counselors often rely on evidence-based interventions such as cognitive behavior theory. This helps individuals process thoughts, challenge their negative beliefs, and rebuild a sense of control. Then we have the trauma focus CBT, which effectively is basically like PTSD, often aligned with emotional distress. Then we have the psychological first aid, which is used for the earlier stage after a disaster, focuses on safety, stability, and concerns. We then can look at the eye movement, desensitizations, and reprocessing, which is commonly used for trauma survivors who struggle intensive memories. Then we have stress management and mindful and helpful approaches, which also can help regulate the nervous system and rebuild resilience. Then we go into group counseling or group support, which can also decrease the stress for workers to connect with others who understand their experience, helping reduce isolation and shame. Then we look at the restoration and routine, which helps individuals reestablish structures, sleep patterns, healthy habits, and boundaries. Now, each of these phases are safety. They're very powerful. They and they help people connect with others, along with have that long-term recovery, which are essential to people who are experiencing major disasters. So in summary, disaster workers face complex and emotional and physical challenges across the heroic, the honeymoon phase, and the disillusionment phase. And the heroic phase demands intense actions and sacrifice. The honeymoon phase brings temporary hope, but may lead to a crash point, while the disillusionment phase can bring deep emotional struggles that require informed clinical support. So basically, understanding these phases not only help us recognize and emphasize what disaster workers go through, but they also help us equip them for the future when they want to seek counseling or seek help that provides approach and proper care and treatment. So that's all I have for today for you guys. Thank you so much for listening. My resources will be listed below this video, and if you need more understanding, please feel free to reach out. But thank you so much for your time and have a blessed day.